Welcome to the Waddyado Podcast, where I sit down and speak with professionals having honest conversations about their careers, how they got into them, and advice for those looking to follow a similar path. But most of all, telling you, the listeners, what it's really like to do that job. In this episode, we speak with Max Mumford, lead software engineer at the FinTech startup Floww. Max talks about his unconventional entrance into software engineering, the importance of collaboration and communication in software engineering, and key resources that helped him gain the experience needed to succeed in his career. There's some great advice in this podcast if you're looking to get into a software engineering career through non-conventional routes. I hope you enjoy. Well, Max, welcome to the Waddyado Podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you today.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So let's get us started with the very simple question of how would you describe what you do for a living to someone who isn't in your profession, perhaps a grandparent or someone who maybe just not in your field?
Good question. So I am a lead software engineer. And what that means is I'm kind of halfway between team manager and halfway between coder. And what coder means is I basically write code in order to create business software. So some coders make websites, some coders make software that you install on your computer. I make software that helps businesses run better, basically.
Love it. Brilliant. So you've had a little bit of a non-traditional route into the sector, and I would love to dive into it a little bit more. So obviously you did a degree in business administration at Reading. Is that right?
That is right. Yeah. Don't know how you got that info, but it's bang on.
LinkedIn is a great resource, guys, you know.
You're lucky I actually have it up to date-ish.
Good stuff. So how did you go from wanting to do a degree in business administration to pivoting into the world of software and coding? Tell us the story.
Yeah, so quite an interesting route. It started more when I was around 16. Believe it or not, I was actually quite artistic when I was a kid. I used to do like batik artwork and some oil painting, stuff like that. When I reached the age of around 14, 15, I think 15, I thought, okay, let's try and sell some of this stuff. And at the time, the internet was kind of new-ish. And I thought, well, obviously you're going to sell it on the internet, right? So I just started building websites, taught myself how to build websites, and very quickly the art just kind of died. I got addicted to the coding side of things. I loved how you could just sort of tap away on the computer and then just magic into existence this whole product. And pretty much anything that you wanted to make, you could make. So I got addicted to that very quickly and kind of kept it going all the way through college and then all the way through university as well. In university, it was a really great source of income. I found a little software company sort of half an hour drive away from my student digs. And I was working with them for pretty much, I think, 2.5 years. Managed to clear my overdraft, came out of university in quite a good financial position. And it just went from there, really. I think the job opportunities were good after university. I thought, I can either go down the route of sort of graduate programs in business management, or I can do this thing that I really love doing. I can get a job easily. At the time, I got an opportunity to move to Brussels, so I did that for a couple of years and went from there, really.
Awesome. I love that. So I'm guessing, so pretty much you're self-taught, right? So what resources did you use in order to gain the skills to become a software engineer?
I'm going to be honest with you, Google. Like this is one of the great things about this industry is you really can just jump in with 2 feet if you want to. If you're interested, you can just get going on your own. All you need is a computer. So there's just so many resources out there to teach you pretty much everything you need to know in this industry and get you up to a good standard so you can go and start looking for jobs. A lot of people go a slightly more structured route. Everyone's different, that works for a lot of people. So, people do what's called a bootcamp course. So that might be like a 3-month course. Maybe it's intensive, full-time. and they'll take you through all the practicalities right from the beginning to becoming a sort of, someone who knows more or less what they're doing at an entry level. So yeah, bootcamp courses are getting more and more popular nowadays. You can go the route of just online courses. So there's lots of very structured courses online which will take you through a particular syllabus that you can choose. Myself, the route I took was a bit more haphazard. I kind of just, when I encountered a problem, I just Googled it and found articles. The kinds of people who make software, I don't know why, but they tend to like to write articles that share their solutions. So, anytime you come up against something that you can't solve, 9 times out of 10, someone else has been there before, and will share their information with you. So that's really nice. There's quite a good community of sharing knowledge in the software engineering industry.
Love that. So it sounds like there's a real community for people to share all of their issues, and people document it, which is pretty cool, to be honest. And so can you recommend any of these communities or any specific places to go to?
Yeah, the big one is a website called stackoverflow.com. Every developer will know it. Literally every single developer will know it. It's kind of like a question and answer message board. So you encounter a problem, you type up your problem, people submit their answers. So yeah, pretty much every developer will have a login to Stack Overflow. But there are, it's the internet, right? There's communities for everything. There are forums for every language under the sun. Every coding language under the sun. There's forums for different frameworks. Everything you could wish for, really.
Awesome. And so you've obviously been in the software engineering world for about 10 years or so now. Is that right? Something like that?
Yeah, maybe even a bit longer too. I don't really want to count.
So what would you say are the best parts of the job?
Best parts of the job, it has to be being able to be creative. The feeling of solving a problem is really quite addictive. So I think there's a big crossover between people who code and people who are into online gaming. Online gaming is notorious for hijacking that dopamine section of your brain. And I'm pretty sure coding does the exact same thing. You encounter a problem, you tackle it head on, you figure it out, and then you get this hit of dopamine when you fixed it at the end. So it's very rewarding. On the technical side of things, very rewarding. You get to be creative as well, because with software engineering, there often is no single right answer. There's 1,000 different ways to solve a problem, and each one has its positives and negatives. So you get to be quite creative from that respect. You can, if you're sort of looking at it from a more holistic perspective, you can take the users into account. So maybe a bit of psychology. You can put that to work and apply those concepts in a way that gets a better user experience. If you are more interested in graphic design or the sort of aesthetic side of things, you can work in that capacity as well. You can work some branding in there if you're interested in that. So you can be creative. And then, of course, on the sort of people side of things, it's very collaborative. If you, depending on your company size and your organization, it can be very collaborative. So if you're working in a team, you get to work with different people, leverage their skill sets. If you get to a management or leadership position, you get to teach people, which is really rewarding.
And so what would you say are the most challenging elements of being a software engineer?
Probably the first couple of years. It's a bit like banging your head against a brick wall for 2 years or so, at least okay. 2 years. Sometimes I really don't know why I started and followed through. But I do know it's the joy you get when you finally solve that problem. So one of the weird things about software engineering is that you have to almost change the way you think, and you come at things in a much more methodical, structured way, and that crosses over into a lot of other areas of your life, which can be really useful. But it takes a while to get to that point, and can be painful.
So I guess the tip here is to persevere through the really difficult times, because you'll come out the other end and you'll hopefully find that solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. And so can you talk us through maybe a particular moment in your career where you felt something was particularly pivotal?
Yeah, I had a few, I would say. So after I lived in Brussels for a couple of years, I came back to the UK and I started freelancing. Um, and it was hard work. It's very difficult to build yourself up in a freelance perspective because, people have to trust you with a lot of money. There's a lot riding on the project. Particularly if you're relatively inexperienced like I was, you're making quite big decisions which have pretty big ramifications on your life. And if they don't go well, then it can really hit you quite hard. Um, so I did that for a couple of years, and then I had an opportunity to switch to contracting, and it was a completely different ball game. You're going into an existing business, you're coming in as somebody who has a very particular skill set, and the business is often already running. They have their proven business model, so you don't have to deal with any of that uncertainty or risk. You just deal with the technical side of things, and that was nice. It was nice to have that change, a bit of more regular income, more money. Obviously, if from the start, because to get to a similar position on the freelance side of things, it would just take a long time and a lot of effort to get there. So I think switching to contracting was a big change for me, and it was financially a very good decision.
And so what practical steps would you advise to those looking to follow a similar path to go contracting in software engineering?
I'd say if you're contracting, one of the biggest things you need to do is become a specialist in something. Generally, when you're hiring a contractor, you're going for someone who really knows their stuff. They have to be top of their game, just come in straight to the business and straight away be able to answer the really difficult questions, hit the ground running, and get things moving. So pick a niche, I would say, and become really hot on that niche.
Nice. And what is your niche?
Oh, so what was my niche? Because I'm not contracting anymore. My niche was I specialize in a particular front-end web framework called Angular. So a web framework is effectively like a package of code that you can use that someone else builds and maintains and makes your work a lot easier. But you still have to learn how to use it. And so, I moved into my current position via contracting as a specialist in Angular.
I see. So did you go freelance to permanent within your current business through that route?
I went freelance to contracting and then contracting to perm.
Gotcha. Okay, great. So what is one common myth that you would like to dispel about the industry?
Common myth. I would say probably the biggest myth is that in order to be the best possible software engineer, you have to be incredibly technical and nothing else. And I think sort of soft skills, communication skills, ability to collaborate is really, really valuable. And I think they're kind of rare to come by, particularly people who are very technical often are not so good on the sort of communication collaboration side of things. So I think working on your ability to collaborate together, share ideas, have a debate that's constructive, take and give criticism constructively is super important. Particularly if you're working within a team, it's so much easier to get the most out of somebody if they're also able to do all those things, as opposed to just off in a silo on their own coding with no contact with anyone else. Well, they'll often end up building the wrong thing, or not communicating to somebody that they're doing this, and then someone else will do the similar kind of work and there'll be overlap and wastage, or that sort of thing.
Do you know what? It's funny you say this, because the there's another episode that I recorded with Ben Gorman, who is actually a lecturer of computer science from Bournemouth University. And he said the biggest and the most challenging frustration that they have with graduates from their degrees is that they are lacking in the communication skills, which are vital in today's workplaces. So what would you recommend to those who are a little bit more technical to develop their communication skills?
It's funny because there's actually a lot of overlap with just the ways you have a relationship with a friend or a partner. I think you have to be good at giving and receiving criticism in a way that's productive. You have to be supportive to people. You have to be positive. You have to be open to valuing everybody's contribution. And I think that's actually really, really important, because sometimes people have a tendency to kind of bulldoze their way in or force their own viewpoint. But the reason you're in this creative industry is because the reason each of your colleagues is in this creative industry is because they have a unique perspective and unique skill set that has served them well. And the more people you get involved, the more sort of viewpoints and different skill sets you can bring to bear on the problem. And I really, really love that. I try to implement that in my management style. So while some industries' management styles that work might be quite top down, I think particularly creative industries like software engineering, you try to bring everyone to the table, let everyone have their viewpoint, and then through that process of dialogue, you actually arrive at the best solution to the problem. And that just applies to so many areas of life. You don't want a friend or a partner who's going to just railroad you in conflict. So many of the skills that you learn are transferable in either direction. If you learn them in your relationships with your partner, you can also bring them to work, and vice versa.
Definitely. I worked with a company called Cargo One, who essentially are a cargo sky scanner in a way. So essentially, They partner with airlines to help utilize space and for cargo and shipping, etc. And one of their values was radical candor, and it's all about continuous improvement, which essentially was talking all around having continuous feedback loops from bottom to the top. And I then implemented that into my business as well with my employees to ensure that there's that continuous cycle of improvement and communication. And I think overall it just helps with everything. It opens up that communication so people can feel comfortable to talk to you and give you feedback, and then equally you can give them feedback too. So that's one thing that I learned from working with them.
Yeah, it's funny actually, because my current workplace, we do the same thing, and I know that they do this all over the world, and it just has different names and different forms. So I know they do it in the army, for example, and so we call them one of the tools we use for this is called retrospectives. So we batch up our work in 2-week sprints, we call them, and at the end of each sprint, we do a retrospective on how things went. And one of the most important things, actually, I think, in running a team, period, is to have an atmosphere where people feel secure to actually share their genuine thoughts, because it's through that dialogue process that you get to address these issues. So in these retrospective meetings, we'll go through and we'll talk about things that went well, things that could be improved for next time, and things that should not be done again. And like you say, it's that continuous feedback loop, right, where you gradually, fortnight by fortnight, get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, and that compound effect is massive very quickly.
Indeed. Yeah, Cargo One again, I'm just going to drop it in there. We did start, stop, continue. I'm calling them retros. I think it's very much a similar thing across the tech industry that is rolled out, and it's a great culture thing, I think, in order to obviously have that continuous improvement. Fab. So just on that, so you obviously mentioned going through 2-week sprints. So could you talk us through what a day-to-day would look like for a software engineer with a couple of years experience? Talk us through their day.
Do you want an individual day, or do you want a 2-week block?
You can give me whatever you like. Whatever you think is going to be the most appropriate.
Okay. I'll give you a day, And if you want to zoom out and do a 2-week block, we can do that too.
Let's do it.
So, day in the life of a developer with a couple of years' experience. Typically, you will be, say you're working within a team, you'll be working on some kind of long-term project. And typically these projects are cut up into smaller deliverables. That process is generally done by other people in your company. So you might have someone called a product owner or a business analyst. You might have a designer who's involved in that, someone from the tech side who come together. They discuss what needs to be done, what needs to be built. They do the planning, they do the design side of things, and then often do that collaboratively with developers as well, and then hand that over to developers to be built. So typical day in the life, you will say you pick up a new piece of work. It will be already specced out, documented out, what you need to be building, what it should look like, how it should function. Often you will already be familiar with this because you'll know all the work that's coming down the line in the next couple of weeks, or even more, ideally. So yeah, you pick it up. It's the morning. Often teams have something called a daily stand-up. So ideally 10, 15 minutes a day, you chat with your team. They tell you what they're working on. You tell them what you're working on. How is this thing progressing? How is that thing progressing? Is there anything blocking you from making progress? What did you do on the weekend? Whatever. Then open up your laptop, open up your coding software, and hopefully you'll have everything you need to do to start typing away. Usually you'll have a version of the thing you're working on will be running on your laptop, on your computer, and the changes that you make will be applied to that piece of software. So make some changes in the code, start the software, give it a test, see if it works. Gradually, you work through your piece of work, and when you're done, you push that into the sort of collaborative version of the software, so everyone has the latest version of your work, and then maybe you will hand that over to a tester whose job it is to basically make sure that you've built what we've asked you to build. It's good to have someone else doing that because testers have a very unique skill set in that they're very good at understanding the software, good at thinking from different perspectives how to break it, which is really important because if they break it, you can fix that vulnerability before someone else does. And then, if the tester gives the A-OK, you can push it forwards to ship, to send to production. So that's a very brief summary. There's lots of ways that can vary. So lots of companies run their processes differently. Obviously, if you're building a large feature that can span days or sometimes even weeks, you maybe you're working collaboratively with your fellow developers, and you might be working on a small portion here, which then slots into the work that they're doing, which could be quite nice. And also, obviously, there's the less happy path, which is, I don't know, you come across some big problem where you can't use this package because it doesn't do this thing that you wanted. So then you have to go back to your tech lead maybe, or your product owner and flag up these issues and have ad hoc meetings and go back and forth and communicate with stakeholders and things like that. So it's not always linear like that. You have to kind of think on your feet and figure out problems as you go. But yeah, that's generally what a day would look like.
Great stuff. Lovely. So it would be silly without me asking this question, so I've got to ask it. And I'm sure you've probably seen lots of webinars, etc., about it. But how is AI going to affect your profession?
I knew that was the question that was coming up. It's a really good question. If I knew, I would probably be able to make an awful lot of money right now. I can't give you a definitive answer. I can give you my hunch. We have already integrated AI quite thoroughly into our working processes. I use ChatGPT pretty much every single day. I use Google like 97% less than I used to. You've already got ChatGPT in some of your tools that you use to code, and it does have the power to write some pretty decent code. but it is regularly wrong, very regularly wrong. My view is, at least for the short to medium term, it'll be more and more pivotal in the way that you work. And it's a bit like having a personal assistant who has just read all the documentation, but is, sorry, I'll start again. It's a bit like having a personal assistant sat next to you who's just read all the documentation for the coding language and the frameworks that you're using, but is like quite inexperienced and doesn't really know how to apply it into the platform that you're working with. I think one of the good things about AI from a developer's perspective, in terms of job security, is that the contextual awareness of the platform as a whole is really lacking. It doesn't know, what business use cases you have. It doesn't know what your infrastructure looks like. It doesn't know how this thing should slot in correctly to maximize code reuse. It doesn't know that you've already got a component that already does this thing that it's trying to do. So there's lots of things. It's very sort of focused on a very small subset of functionality. So where it's very good is solving a very small particular problem. Maybe you need to write some code using a language that you haven't written in 5 years and have forgotten. It's really good at getting you started on that. But when it comes to the bigger picture, introducing code that's going to be actually maintainable and understandable, it's not good at that. So you're kind of like the steward for it. It's as if you have an assistant, effectively, is what I'm trying to say.
I think a lot of people can say that across a lot of professions. Even for example, with content, you can get ChatGPT to write out a content strategy, let's say, but without the context of what you're doing and the ability to execute something, it doesn't really mean anything. So I think that just goes to show you still need someone behind ChatGPT to help guide it ultimately. Otherwise, it's going to create errors. Great. Yeah. Thank you for those insights there, Max. So let's get into the nitty gritty of cash. So how much can you earn as an entry-level software engineer?
So this varies a lot because it depends what you're making. It depends where you're located. I would say, obviously, if you're in London, you're going to be earning more than if you're somewhere with a cheaper cost of living. If you're working to build the next disruptor bank like Monzo, you're going to be earning more than if you're building marketing sites for small local businesses. So it really varies. And it also varies on individual attitude as well and the company you're working for, your ability to negotiate, that kind of thing. To give you a rough ballpark, I would say for a junior who has, say, between 0 to 2 years experience, you might be looking at maybe 30 to 45K. For a mid-level developer, say 2 to 5 years experience roughly, you might be looking at around 45 to 70. And for a senior, sort of 5+ years of experience, you might be looking at, say, 60 to 85, that kind of thing. And then for a lead, 7 years plus experience, I would say generally, you might be looking at sort of 75, 80 to the low hundreds mark. So 110, 125, that kind of thing.
Great stuff. Thank you for those insights. It's very interesting. And what would you say are the pivotal things in order for people to actually move up the ladder in software engineering? What can people do in order to boost their careers?
So I think like any job nowadays, you get the biggest pay bump when you change company. So
insert a recruiter.
Yeah, right, yeah. She didn't pay me to say this, by the way. Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, yeah, loyalty to a company doesn't really pay generally. You may be at a company which are quite proactive with their salary bumps, which is really nice. So it's kind of a rule of thumb. So that's one thing I would say. I would also say there are different ways that you measure someone's performance. So the way we've done it in the past is you have sort of metrics around technical prowess. You have metrics around your ability to collaborate. You might look at their sort of influence within the company, the projects they've taken on, the causes they've championed. So there's lots of different ways to look at this, and also there are different routes you can go. So a lot of people think after senior, so in terms of career bandings, after senior is team lead. Well, a lot of people who get to that level don't actually want to manage. So often it depends on the company, but often they'll have a different route, which is kind of parallel to team lead, but is more on the technical side of things. So when you get to that point, it would be all about really honing in on a particular specialization and being the go-to person to work on this particular niche subject. So yeah, I think it really depends on your particular company. You can try to be as well rounded as possible. Maybe you try to go and focus in on one particular specialization. I think the criteria are different based on where you work, really.
I think that was a good answer, to be honest. It's quite holistic and brings into account lots of different elements that you can level up into your role. So
yeah,
thank you for that. So what 3 actionable steps would you recommend to those looking to get into the industry then?
Ooh. Honestly, best thing you can do is just jump in with 2 feet. It's such an accessible industry. Just start Googling. Get a course which will take you from in a couple of weeks will take you from knowing absolutely nothing to putting together a very basic website. I think that's the best thing you can do, because then if it's not for you, you know quite quickly that it's not for you and you can move on. But if you enjoy it, then you can start putting more effort and more investment into it. There definitely is value in having a structured introduction to software development. The route I went was quite haphazard and ad hoc. I kind of learned a little bit here and learned a little bit there. And I did suffer from that a little bit. A few years later, when I was working with people who had a computer science degree, they might be talking about compilers, and I had no idea what they're talking about. And it takes quite a long time to sort of get up to speed on the bits of knowledge that I missed. So I think once you have confirmed you actually enjoy coding, step 2 would be getting yourself some kind of structured introduction to the industry, and spend some time doing that. Step 3, you can always, in fact, what would step 3 be? And I think step 3 would be just make something, put it online, with the focus of having this as an example of something you have made for when you go and look for jobs. I think one of the best proofs that you can give someone if you're trying to get a job as a software engineer is just show them something you've built. And it doesn't have to be perfect. If you say to them, look, I'm new to this, I've taught myself, I've jumped in, I've got my hands dirty, this is what I've made, I've really enjoyed it, I'm open to learning, I'm curious, I love the process, and I'm easy to work with and easy to get on with, and I learn quickly and I work hard. I think they're much more likely to want to take you on and invest in you and train you up than someone who maybe might know a bit more, but could be a little difficult to work with, not so good at collaborating, that kind of thing.
I think willingness to learn is, overlooked sometimes from a candidate perspective, from their own perspective, but actually from a hiring manager's perspective, the willingness to learn and being adaptable, and ultimately it will just demonstrate that you're willing to give things a go and try, and you're moldable, which is exactly what people want to see as an entrant into software engineering or any role, really. And so with regards to go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think if you can also look at things from the perspective of the person who's interviewing you. No manager wants to hire someone who they think is going to be a real pain to work with, right?
Yeah.
You want someone who is going to take on board your feedback, remember it, and be adaptable and be easy to work with and flexible. And I think that counts for so much.
Absolutely, it does indeed. And so with regards to portfolios, could you recommend anyone or any site that people could host their portfolios or their products that they've been playing with or building on?
Yeah, so I mean, the go-to place for hosting code is a site called github.com. There'll be plenty of guides for how to use it. Yeah, that will be the place where you want to put your code up. In terms of hosting websites, there's lots of free solutions. So Google has one called Firebase, which is one of the services I've used in the past, which just gives you totally free website hosting. With the combination of those two services, you can get a website online for £5 a year. It's really a cheap and affordable and approachable industry to get involved in.
Love that. Great. So let's get back onto you. Talk me through someone who's really inspired you in your career and why they've inspired you.
Yeah, so there's a chap I used to work with called Nick Wakefield. He's a Scrum Master, so not even my job position, completely different role.
For those who don't know what a Scrum Master is, could you just fill us in?
Yeah, a Scrum Master is basically somebody who tries to get the team to work better together. So they guide you to implement processes that are effective. They might give people coaching to figure out how they can get the most out of them. They help people enjoy their job more, make the right decisions better, that kind of thing. Worked with a colleague called Nick Wakefield, Scrum Master in my company. And I think he had a really big effect on the way we worked. Before he joined, we were an effective team, but there were ways in which we weren't effective. And so he just kind of put in iterative processes. Going back to our discussion about doing retros, he put in iterative processes that gradually improved every week, just improved the way it worked here and a little bit. And after a while, the difference in people's day-to-day lives was huge. And I think that's why I value it so much, is because it's not all about just, can we make the company work more effectively? There's people and there's actually their day-to-day lives and their experience of their everyday that you're having an effect in this way. And I think managers have that effect as well. They do have a contribution towards the lives of their team members. But one of the things I really appreciated about Nick is that he had a very pragmatic way of getting everyone to work better together and getting people to just enjoy their job more, really.
And how did he do that?
I have to remember now.
You got to tell us how. You can't just say that he was great. We need to know the details. Otherwise, how are people going to learn from it?
So hold on, let me just get my notes. 1 second.
Well, I can refer back to James Clear with Atomic Habits, which is all around obviously identifying small habits that you can make in order to build upon them each day, each week, each month, each year, which will ultimately have a positive impact on your life. And I think that's probably a little bit maybe what you're talking about. Am I right on that?
That's certainly part of it, yeah, for sure. But I guess that's a kind of structure that you can use in order to make those little improvements. But I think a lot of the things that Nick put in, they were very practical day-to-day lessons. So, for example, there's a difference between the conditions that are optimum for a manager to work in, and there are different conditions that are optimum for a software engineer to work in. So, for example, a manager gets the bulk of their work done during meetings, which is why their day is just meeting after meeting after meeting, and they're making decisions throughout the day. Whereas someone like a software engineer gets the bulk of their work done in between meetings, and actually the meetings are really disruptive. So pretty much one of the first things that Nick brought in when he joined the company was we tried to make all of our meetings in the morning, which gave developers the whole afternoon to just get their head down and focus and have an uninterrupted block of work. Because that context switching is actually really damaging. When you're switching from one thing to the other constantly, you lose your train of thought. And particularly in software, when you're dealing with so much complexity already, you just can't be being distracted constantly. So a lot of things like that. He was good at helping us question the processes that were in place. I think one of the things that Nick was very keen on was don't follow processes just for the sake of following the process. If it doesn't serve you, get rid of it. You can be pragmatic. And kind of in the same vein, everybody works differently. There is no one size fits all way for people to work. I personally have 2 external monitors and my laptop in the middle and a separate keyboard and a mouse, and that's how I work best. I've got a colleague who works just on his laptop with one screen and the laptop keyboard, and I could not imagine working like that, but it works for him, and that's how he gets the most out of himself. So try to be flexible, try to be adaptable, give people the freedom to figure out how they want to work and how they want to be most effective. And I think that also comes back to this point around everyone has their own contribution to make, and your job as the manager is to sort of set the stage in such a way that you're able to get the most out of each individual with their own needs and specialities.
Great. So what I got from that was make sure that your employees are in a state of flow, or the software engineers are in a state of flow. Challenge the status quo. If it doesn't work, then you should always be challenging and maybe coming up with a solution as well, rather than just being negative and criticizing. And then obviously promoting autonomy as well, I think goes hand in hand with your last point there, which is great. Okay,
yeah.
perfect.
I've got one more if you want.
Yeah, go for it. We are here.
So something else, one of the other things that he was quite good at is I think there's often this tension between the software development team and the external stakeholders. And one of the most important things to learn as a software developer, as a product owner, as a designer, as a tester, is to be able to say no constructively to your stakeholders. One of the best things you can do is just teach yourself canned phrases in order to say no to these people.
Such as?
So imagine you've got 5 things on your roadmap that you need to do within the next 2 weeks, and you don't have enough time, and you're at capacity, and you're stressed out. And then someone comes and they says, "Okay, do this other thing as well, please." What you need to not do is say, "Fine," because something's not going to get done. You're going to snap. You're going to burn out. You're not going to be able to deliver it. The best thing for everybody involved is to learn how to say no and use one of these kind of phrases. So, for example, you might say, "That's great. I can see the value in that. I've currently got these 5 things that I'm working on. Which one would you like me to drop so I can take on this new thing?" And by doing that, you're sort of validating their viewpoint. You're understanding where they're coming from and the pressures that they're feeling. But at the same time, you're also giving the difficult decision to them, making it real to them that you have this sort of trade-off in what you can deliver. And the nice thing about that is, in a way, everyone gets to win and no one gets sort of too pressured.
I love that. I think that could be applicable to many professions, in fact.
For sure.
So yeah. I'm definitely going to keep that one in my back pocket. Great stuff. So finally, obviously you're a hiring manager right now. So what are your pet peeves with regards to hiring, for example, CV related, when in interviews? Lay it all out on the table.
Pet peeves in hiring.
Can you give me an example of maybe something that's happened in an interview where you've been a bit like, "Oh, wish you hadn't said that," or something like that?
I've had an interview where someone clearly hadn't written the code that they'd claimed to have written.
Oh, I bet that happens all the time. So how did you find out?
Well, I was sort of asking her questions. We were running through the code that she'd sent us, and I was asking her questions. Can you talk about this? Can you talk about this? Can you explain what you did here? And she just said nothing, like literally nothing, to the point where I thought, is this a language issue? So I said, is there a language barrier here? It wasn't a language barrier. We just used, I don't know if she got someone else to do the coding solution for her. I don't know what was going on. I actually, I noticed from her CV that she could speak French, so I asked her in French, would you rather we switch to French? Because I thought if it's a language issue, we just switch to French and it'll be okay. But no, that didn't work either. So I think there's being a bit ambitious and going for jobs which perhaps are a little bit would stretch you, but you do it anyway because that's how you grow and that's how you learn. And you'll get, maybe if you get the job, you just learn on the job a little bit. And then there's outright lying.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna get basically, kids, don't lie. Just don't lie in interviews. You will always get found out, especially with competency based questions where people dig in a little bit further, try and get under the hood and try and peel it back. And if you can't answer the questions, you're going to get found out. So you just look like a tit. So don't do it.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Okay, fabulous. So I'm going to ask you one final question, and it's a little bit of a curveball one because I'm feeling a bit more in a fun mood today. So if you could have anybody play you in a film, who would it be?
Oh, does this have to be related to software engineering? Can it just
No, it doesn't have to be like...
Who's
that? I don't even know who that is.
No.
Oh, a Loki flex. Oh, that's embarrassing. That's embarrassing. I'm not down with the kids with the lingo. Sorry. Okay, who would be your Loki flex then? Come on.
My Loki flex was that I was in Las Vegas once and I was wearing a very fancy blazer, which I just bought the night before, and someone said I kind of look like Robert Pattinson. So I would absolutely take that.
Okay.
Absolutely take that. I think it's reaching. It's definitely reaching, but
I think. Yeah, I reckon it's the fact that you were in Vegas and you were British and male, and that probably nailed it. But yeah, if anyone wants to actually see what Max looks like, you can find him on LinkedIn, Max Mumford, software lead at Floww.
I want to maintain the illusion, but I actually look like Robert Pattinson. You just have to cut the video feed here.
Well, I'll tell you what, when I was in Vegas in last year as well for a conference, I managed to get into the VIP at Sphere thanks to my wonderful client. And next to me were Ed Sheeran and Tom Hanks. So I'm just going to drop that in there. And
very cool.
Yeah, that was quite cool. And I totally freaked out. And he was really embarrassed by me. So I won't be doing that again.
Put him in the back and fangirl. Like, oh, okay. I went a bit mental. Anyway, we move on. But look, Max, thank you so much for your time today. You've been an absolute gem and have definitely given some great advice on those looking to get into a software engineering career. So thank you very much. My pleasure. Nice to catch up.
Thank you so much for listening to the Waddyado Podcast. Whether you're looking for a job or ready to find your latest inspired hire, head over to waddyado.com/jobs or click the link in the description. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share with anyone you think would love this episode.